Hi. So I have been thinking a bit about this very unfortunate decision that New Zealand has made to basically distance itself from the Five Eyes, which I guess from now on we'll have to call the Four Eyes. This strategic partnership between the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, Canada, and formerly New Zealand. So they've basically decided to go their own path, or rather, I should say, the New Zealand government has. I very much doubt that there will be widespread enthusiasm among the New Zealand population for this. There might be, but I'd be surprised. Um, I'm going to read out an op-ed from a freelance writer in the Times because I think he really sums it up very well. Jawad Iqbal. I think he really summarises how I feel, and this is entirely his intellectual property. I'm just quoting it, and it's in Thunderer in the Times, dated the 21st of April. So I'm just going to read this out, then maybe broaden, share a few more of my thoughts, because I think this is really unfortunate what New Zealand's decided to do. So this is the article by Jawad Iqbal. New Zealand's response to China abuse is spineless. How can New Zealand, a self-declared global leader in human rights, justify siding with China, a regime that imprisons people in concentration camps and crushes pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong? Easily enough, it seems, when the country's leaders are willing to portray it in a fear standing up to China ahead of their principles. So much so that New Zealand is prepared to abandon the coordinated effort by the Five Eyes Security Alliance, whose other members are Britain, America, Canada, and Australia, to put pressure on Beijing over human rights abuses. Naya Muhuta, New Zealand Foreign Minister, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, justifies the new approach by saying that the country is uncomfortable with applying such pressure. Well, yes, confronting a dictatorial regime used to getting its own way is uncomfortable. That's the point of making a principled stand. Instead, Mahuta favours raising concerns privately with China. Matters such as human rights should be approached in a consistent country agnostic manner, she says. This will be music to Beijing's ears. By declaring it won't engage with China through the Five Eyes alliance, New Zealand is turning its back on historical alliances underpinning security in the region. It goes against a joint decision that's made a forge an expanded role for the Five Eyes network, with a commitment to advance the shared values of democracy, freedom, and respect for human rights. This included criticism of Hong Kong's creeping path towards authoritarianism, as well as the mistreatment of Uyghurs in the Xinjiang region. It infuriated Beijing, which shows it is working. The truth is that New Zealand's government has long been guilty of a supine attitude towards China. Last month, 14 nations raised concerns about Beijing's apparent meddling in the World Health Organization's investigation into the origins of the pandemic. New Zealand declined to put its name to the communique. In January, it failed to sign a statement from the other Five Eyes countries condemning the arrest of pro-democracy politicians in Hong Kong. When the offices of Anne-Marie Brady, a New Zealand academic and expert on Chinese propaganda, were burgled in 2018, the investigation got nowhere. Her testimony to a parliamentary inquiry was cancelled on dubious procedural grounds. The Five Eyes the Five Eyes Network is a mutual endeavour based on long-standing democratic alliances. Surely questions must now be asked about New Zealand's fitness to remain the member. I totally agree with that. I think he summed that up very well. It's a very sad thing, and I think it definitely damages the legacy of Jacinda Ardern. You know, for a long time, she kind of been hailed as a great leader. Her handling of COVID, New Zealand has one of the lowest death rates and infection rates in the world. Um, Her progressive attitudes towards many things. You know, she's one of the world's youngest leaders. Well, this casts quite a different light on her government. Frankly, one of moral cowardice. Um, and I think any assessment of her premiership needs to take this into account because it's pretty disgraceful. And the only explanation is New Zealand is scared of Beijing. And on the surface, that's understandable. China is a far, far bigger, more powerful country than New Zealand is. New Zealand's a great country. It's a modern country, it's a wealthy country, and it's got a generally pretty good human rights record. comparatively speaking. So it's very, very sad that they have decided to, you know, give China what it wants. This idea we will raise human rights matters privately. This sounds a lot like the Cameron Osborne era in Britain, when Chinese state media actually praise Osborne for not raising human rights concerns, and this sounds like a repeat of that. Now, of course, it's not easy standing up to China. It's not an easy thing to do. China is a very powerful country, but it's the right thing to do given the behaviour in recent years. So I just think this is very sad. We have to be careful, though, not to sort of see this as a New Zealand position. It's a position of the democratically elected New Zealand government, but I imagine a lot of New Zealanders will not be happy about this. Now, if their position is we don't want to be pushed around by a coalition led by the United States, okay, but don't frame it as we'll go our own way and then expect that they will have leeway to do so. If New Zealand thinks that China's going to respect that, it won't. It's just going to see it as an invitation to walk all over New Zealand. New Zealand is in a much stronger position by being part of this alliance, much stronger. Um, so I think New Zealand's making a very big mistake, because what you'll see happening is China will see it as a soft touch. China will try to undermine it as best as possible, and then naturally that will lead to tensions with Australia, because Australia and New Zealand have a maritime border, obviously. Um, so if China moves through New Zealand as a way of getting at Australia, that will lead to tensions between Canberra and Auckland. So I just think that it's a very sad situation that the New Zealand government's taken this stance. Um, I understand that Westernized countries with shared values of liberal democracy aren't always going to see eye to eye, and I wouldn't expect New Zealand as a sovereign state to absolutely agree with everything that the other four countries do. But surely the issue of China is just too important to be this naive. Um, I just find that astonishing. There was a former New Zealand Prime Minister, David Lang, who took an independent stance on nuclear issues, and that also caused some polarization. But I really think that when it comes to the rise of China, there is absolutely no room for mistakes, and I think New Zealand is making a grave mistake with this. It's morally indefensible what they're doing. This idea that we'll just raise concerns privately, that's what China wants to hear. China doesn't want public rebuke. China thinks now that New Zealand's going to be a soft touch, because unfortunately it is. And what the Ardern administration has done with this is sold its soul. It's a very sad thing, and I think Boris Johnson was right to criticise it. I'm sure he took no pleasure in criticising an ally. It's a sad thing, but it's necessary. But there's another aspect of this. China will be gloating over Five Eyes becoming Four Eyes. I remember they made a state announcement, or I was in one of their state mouthpieces, saying we'll poke if the Five Eyes will poke those eyes out. Well, I honestly think we should consider getting closer to Japan, getting closer to Taiwan, getting closer to South Korea. There's no reason why this alliance cannot be broadened with mutual interests. Why not? And if China feels it's being put into a corner, it's only got itself to blame. It's dishonesty with the World Health Organization over the pandemic. It's brutal treatment of the weaker people, and it's pathetic denials. It's undermining of democracies. It's jingoistic state propaganda. I mean, yeah, I don't need to lay out all the issues I take with the Chinese government, but this is a very big mistake that New Zealand is making, in my opinion. I respect it's a sovereign state, and it's not up to Britain or America or Canada or Australia to demand that New Zealand comply. But as allies, I think we can express concerns, and I think New Zealand is making a serious mistake. and I do think it's morally cowardly. It's just as cowardly as those university departments that sell their soul to get Chinese investment. But of course, it's much worse because this is a whole nation state we're talking about, at least the government of that nation state. So this is a sad, sad decision by New Zealand. Um, you know, it would be understandable if it was somewhere like Tajikistan or Eritrea or a country that had its own disregard for human rights. This is New Zealand we're talking about, a country that really, really should know better. And I cannot, or a government rather, I'd be interested in hearing from New Zealanders. What do you think of this? Um, do you think it's the right decision? I mean, the way I look at it is this notion of going alone. You cannot have an equilibrium between China and New Zealand. You can have an equilibrium between China and Five Eyes. It's just, I think it's woefully mistaken. I think it's profoundly naive, and I think it's morally inexcusable. Five Eyes members can have disagreements. That's not the issue. The issue is to totally distance themselves from this. It's a very sad situation. Let me know your thoughts.